Good.
Hi, well, this is Tom Tresser of the Civic Lab, and we are talking to students from the Harris School about revising the city charter for the city of Chicago. No small matter. Has never been done as far as I know. So I call myself a civic educator and public defender. And the civic education part is pretty self-explanatory. I think it's important for people to know basic stuff in order for them to govern themselves. And Chicago is a particularly difficult place to do civic work because it's the most corrupt city in America. And it's very arrogant and opaque. And it's often very difficult to just get basic information that you need in order to do good policy work. So for many years, it was hard to get a copy of the city budget, for example. But the other part of my self-appointed title called public defender may take a little explanation. Chicago is the home ground zero for privatization. And I, as a civic actor, as an activist, and as a thoughtful practitioner, let's say, of grassroots democracy, oppose privatization on every front as a financialization of the public interest, as taking things that are owned by the many and giving them to the few. There are many, many reasons why privatization is a terrible thing and should be opposed by all thoughtful practitioners of public policy. Anybody and anybody pretending to go into government or wherever you guys think you're going, unless I think you better know about privatization and better be able to defend the public, or you're no good. And I would urge you to get out of the Harris School if they're not teaching you about privatization and why and what the arguments are against it. Unfortunately, the University of Chicago is one of the worst offenders. And so you find yourselves, I hope you understand, in an awkward position at the Harris School of Public Policy, which, by the way, is named after a billionaire, the Harrises. So the University of Chicago itself is a bad actor, and I hope you know that, in the South Side of Chicago, in the Black communities down there. They are not well thought of. They're a bad neighbor, and they have pursued many bad public policies as a large entity. So the University of Chicago is not some neutral thing that people come to study like yourselves. It is a powerful player in the body politic of Chicago. And I would also say, because of its business school, which of course you are not part of, but the idea that
I am part of the business school. I'm a joint degree student.
You're a joint degree. All right. Well, then your hands are bloody, sir, because the University of Chicago's business school says the market can do no wrong. So that is a position that sits next to public policy in the city of Chicago. So what I'm saying to you is, you have to be aware, even though you're fish swimming in the sea right now, trying to get yourself graduated, but you are part of something that you need to understand, especially if you're going to be policy experts. But the University of Chicago's business school, which says that the market can do no wrong, is part of what we would call a neoliberal construct about what is a government for. And so since you're sitting in the University of Chicago, in the city of Chicago, you have to understand the context you're in. Otherwise, you're fooling yourselves, and you're not doing anyone any good by trundling along, producing studies for whoever your client is. In this case, it's Joe Ferguson, whoever he thinks he's going to give his product to, whether it's the mayor or the city council, or maybe he's going to write a book, or wherever your work is going. You have to understand the context in which you're operating, and that's my first task to you. Okay, that being said, I oppose privatization. I've opposed the University of Chicago on many fronts, including its attempt to build the Obama Center. So again, this is happening right now while you're studying and getting your degree. The University of Chicago just grabbed about 50 acres of public land from Jackson Park to site the Obama Center there, and it was the main driver there. Now, the University of Chicago, as I said, says the market can do no wrong, and they love the market except when they can steal your public shit. So the University of Chicago has hundreds of acres of land that it owns, many hundreds of properties that it bought when it was trying to prosecute the Olympics here. So again, this is a little before you got to Chicago, but you can see the sign behind me that says "No Game Chicago." I was one of the lead organizers that stopped Chicago's Olympic bid, and this is all connected. So the University of Chicago bought up a lot of land in anticipation of Washington Park being the main host of the Olympics, with the Olympic Stadium there. The Olympic bid did not happen, thanks to me and my colleagues. So the University of Chicago is left with dozens of vacant lots that it bought. And so what's it going to do? It ginned up the Obama Center. It didn't offer its own land to the Obama Foundation. Instead, it said, why don't you take a bunch of Jackson Park? You want to use that for the Obama Center, and all our land immediately increases in value. That is real. That is happening right now. And I wish somebody would, inside the University of Chicago, would call them out on it, because they are moving this through the public policy process, right? And you can say it's external to you. You're studying what you're studying. What does it have to do, with your lives? Well, if you're at the Harris School and you're studying public policy inside the city of Chicago and you're not aware of any of these things, then I'd say you're being duped, and you're not helping us any. Okay, that's me.
Yeah, I was just gonna, Tom, just for kind of level setting and what students at the university think and kind of are doing. So I would say that, especially at the Harris School, there is a really good understanding among students of kind of the urban renewal efforts of the university kind of in the past, and a lot of kind of the bad things it's done in more recent history. So there is a lot of dialogue around that. I would agree with you that I think there's a lack of activism and kind of ownership amongst that, even with the students. But I think there's more of an understanding of that now than there ever has been in the past.
Good.
And then especially with the Obama Center, I know that at Harris, there has been dialogue among students. Like, I've been involved in many conversations discussing like the location of the center, why exactly it's in Jackson Park. So I just want you to make sure you're not thinking that, these are things we've never thought of before. These are things that are
good. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just offer myself as a resource. The Civic Lab is a super critical entity which has called out the city multiple times. And one of the things that we're very busy on right now is tax increment financing, which again, the Harris School is silent on. I haven't been able to get myself in front of the Harris School for 10 years. So nobody from the Harris School wants me to come to you. You guys have come to me on your own, however you found me. Like, you're a third or fourth class that's interviewed me. But as the Harris School itself, to invite me as a lecturer or as a guest to be in residence to present what we have found at the Civic Lab about Chicago public policy, which includes the Olympics, the Obama Center, or let's put it this way, privatization of public land. Let's say, if you want to put it together as one topic, or gentrification, if you will, or tax increment financing. Again, Chicago was the worst offender in TIFs in the country. We've got 134 TIF districts right up all around Hyde Park. The university is not in a TIF district that I know of, but Hyde Park is heavily TIFed. So again, you are sitting, if you're thinking about, you're trying to make a city great. So if you guys may leave Chicago and go to other cities for your careers and lives, you need to know about TIFs. Otherwise, you're fooling yourselves. You can't really discuss modern urban policy, modern geography of cities, or let's put it this way, equity, racial justice, or racial equity, economic parity, unless you are confronting TIFs. So you have to have a position. You either think they're good and they're being used wisely, or you think, well, it's a tool that maybe is off the rails, but it could be perhaps adjusted. Or, as the Civic Lab believes, it's a racist and corrupt practice that needs to be ended. But I've never seen any discussion of it inside the University of Chicago, even though you've got several centers that look at economic. There's like a crime lab. There's an economic justice lab. I mean, you guys got labs out the yin yang, as well as, of course, the Harris School itself. I think there's even a cohort that looks at computers. I think it's like it's between the computer guys and the Harris School, so it's data,
yep.
Right?
The MS-CAP program, yep.
Yeah, so it's like looking at data for social good or data for public policy. None of those guys want to engage with us, because they would have to confront this endemic racism that they're part of, and which TIFs, tax increment financing, is part of. So again, you're choosing to be at the University of Chicago in Hyde Park in Chicago. You have to remember contract buying, home buying, which was on the South Side. You have to understand blockbusting, predatory lending, over-policing, the closing of public schools, and now TIF districts. All these are the legacies of the city of Chicago, right where you are, right where you live and study. This is real, right to the present day. And I don't see any consciousness about this inside you know, the people who are looking at policy. So anyway, I'm just putting this out there. You're talking to somebody who's highly critical of the University of Chicago, especially in these times. I mean, you know, so we have a pandemic that's killing black and brown people 3 to 5 to 1, and yet the city is still silent. The city is still hoarding public money and misusing it right up to the present day. So I put that on the table. So now ask me what you want to ask me.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for that context too. It's important to kind of, you know, ground ourselves in that, given that we are at U of C. So I think it would be really helpful for us because, so we all have, we've all read The New Chicago Way. We've all done a good amount of research. However, I think a lot of that can kind of present, you know, one argument. I would love to hear more about your book, Chicago is Not Broke, and kind of your thesis around, basically your thesis around Chicago's budget, around Chicago's finances. We'll get into more specific questions, but I think I wanted you to just give us a broad overview there.
Okay, so I guess the heart of the matter is this neoliberal construct of government. So the questions that I would present to you would be along these lines. The first is, who plans what for who? So again, the Harris School, you know, is part of an elite body. You guys are going to go into wherever your career takes you as professional planners. You're then going to be part of the cadre of people who put shit on communities, whether you work for a city government or you work for Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, or wherever your career takes you. The question is, what gives you the right to plan for Englewood or Kansas City or whatever, you know? And that's a real problem for Chicago. And again, this goes back to our history of Daniel Burnham. You know, I'm sure you're familiar with the Chicago plan, which looks like this, right?
Yep.
So the City Club, again, this is all part of the construct of Chicago. The City Club, the commercial club, is an elite body that is still in power today. And the Civic Committee of the commercial club is the group that hired Daniel Burnham in 1907. And their grandchildren still run the city, you know what I'm saying? So the commercial club is an elite organization of Chicago's corporate elite. And they are kind of behind a lot of the things that we know as planning. And so Daniel Burnham, as the father of modern urban planning, the City Beautiful movement, right? Okay, this is kind of how we do planning. This is the legacy of Chicago to the world. This is what a city plan looks like. You get some professional people and they do some data, and they produce, you know, all kinds of things, you know, plans and whatever. And then they go out and they start getting you know, the money and the resources to make the plan real. But there's a lot that's left out. Okay, so that's the first question. Who plans what for who, and who makes money from those plans? The second question is, what does it mean to say that your community is developed? What does that mean, development? Now, what we say at the Civic Lab is, because of the neoliberal construct, everything is about a transaction or real estate. So the way it gets translated into plans is, we, the planning department, and therefore the city, becomes a tool to facilitate real estate transactions. That's what we mean by development. It's a contract between the developer and the city to create something, whether it's Lincoln Yards, where I live, or Project 78, a little closer to you, or the Michael Reese Hospital site, which is very close to you guys. All these are mega cities pushed by billionaire developers, all getting hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of city subsidy versus from the tax increment financing program. So if the answer is what a city looks like to be developed is to create another high-end retail, condo heavy, whatever, by the water, that's problematic. Okay, so that's the next question. Then the next question after this is Chicago really broke? Because if we can find money to do all those things, which we do, why can't we have money to put nurses in public schools, which we don't have? Or why don't we have money for librarians in our public schools, which we don't have? You know what I'm saying? So again, if there's ample public money to be present for what the mayor wants or what the developer class wants or what Mr. Harris wanted when he owned Harris Bank, before he died and gave his money to your school, if there's money to do their bidding, why isn't there money to make my life better on the far south side? And unless you confront those critical questions, you're just fooling yourselves. You're just window dressing, and we really don't need you because we've got enough guys already doing the master's bidding. We don't need any more people doing the master's bidding. We need a few people who will do the people's bidding. And the last question that follows from these first three is who's watching our backs? Because if our city councilmen are not doing this, and they're pretty much craven and pretty much useless, in my opinion. The city of Chicago, if this is part of what I'm sure you're looking at with the charter. It's a very strong executive, and you have these 50 aldermen. It's like 50. Are you kidding me? Los Angeles only has 9 councilmen. What the hell? So again, the structure of our government is reflective of the machine, and it's about distributive power. It's about that kind of patronage and having layers and layers of useless government. All these are artifacts of the machine, and it's really doesn't really speak to making any sense. So you have 50 aldermen, and each of them have maybe a staff of 4 to 5. There is no entity like a congressional budget office that we would say would give our legislature independence so they can push back and create their own policies. So again, the aldermen are like, to me, the concierge of a mid-class hotel. You call when you want more towels. That's what the aldermen are. They're like, alderman, I need more trash cans. I got rats. Can you get me? I need a new awning for my restaurant. Can you help me get that? There's no deliberation. So for all that, we have a very powerful mayor who runs the city government of over $20 billion. So maybe that's part of what you're looking at, in terms of breaking the city up, maybe, into 5 little cities or something, or maybe 100 little neighborhoods. I mean, I think it's on the thinking has to be on that level. Anyway, so the book comes from the TIF work, and the TIF work comes from the Olympic fight. So when we were fighting the Olympic bid, the Mayor Daley, said Chicago was definitely broke and therefore needed to bring the Olympics. We needed to sell our parking meters. Remember, that's what he did in 2008. Again, I hope that's studied inside the Harris School as the worst policy ever done by any government in the history of the universe.
I assure you it is.
It is. Yeah. I'm glad of it because Chicago is a laughingstock globally in the halls of justice, in good government, in seminars all over the world when activists are trying to explain to people about what it is to have public, what is the virtue of public. All they have to do is show a picture of a parking meter, and everybody understands, like, oh, that was really stupid, and then they can go from there about why. Anyway, Mayor Daley said at the time, we're broke, we have no money in our coffers, and we have no ideas in our heads about how to make the city prosperous. So how smart are we to bring the 2016 Olympics here? So we're going to hunt for that, and we were one of the 4 finalist cities, as you may know. But we at No Game Chicago, this group of activists without even an office, tried to demolish that argument. And one of the ways we did so was by getting hold of all the TIF reports. And so again, you guys know what a TIF district is, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So in 2009, when we were doing this work, we looked at the TIF reports that were available most recently, and these were from 2008, and there was 164 TIF districts at that time. Then all we did was get a hold of these documents, this group of volunteers, and opened up these 164 PDFs one at a time and extracted the numbers from the balance sheets, which is a very simple operation. As your class could probably do it in about 5 hours, you know, if you really put your mind to it. But it had never been done before. not by anybody at the Harris School, not by the Department of Planning itself, not by any think tank like the Metropolitan Planning Council. Nobody wanted to touch these things, and nobody wants to touch them to this day. In any case, by performing this simple operation back in the day, we found $1.5 billion sitting in the TIF accounts. Now, how does that square with Mayor Daley's claim that we're broke and that we must bring the Olympics to Chicago, which, by the way, is probably going to cost us $15 billion conservatively? So it was basically a lie, and we helped that simple occurrence, that simple operation, and our assertion, which has never been refuted. I mean, no one denied that the money was there, helped torpedo the Olympic bid and helped crater Chicago's public opinion about it. And I got fascinated with these TIFs because I was like saying, like, this is a lot of money, you know, to sort of go off the books, as it were, to go missing. And so we founded the TIF Illumination Project, and we do this kind of work. You know, it's sort of graphics, you know, it's sort of popular education with a little humor. You know, this is like a wanted poster. But the heart of the work is again, data mining, map making, graphic design, and reporting. So these dots mapped against the 27th Ward are the projects that got TIF money with an explanation of what they are. And this piece that I'm showing you right now is from 2013. So we've been invited to do 186 presentations, none of them at the University of Chicago, I would add, all by community groups that want to understand how TIFs are harming their neighborhoods. And that's 15,000 people that we've illuminated. So the more we looked into TIFs, the more we saw how abused and racist this thing is, and how it really is the secret sauce behind the machine. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you're a developer and you get $1 million or $2 million for your downtown office building, you turn around and gave Mayor Daley $100,000. So Mayor Daley and his allies, and we're talking about from the early 2000s to the time he retired, he would have $6 to $7 million in his campaign war chest. He never faced serious opposition, so he didn't have to use that money. Instead, he used that money to distribute power to his allies and lackeys. So he would fund down ticket races. He would take care of the literature for other candidates. You know what I'm saying? He would send campaign workers, do media buys, and so forth. So that's the secret source behind the Chicago machine that nobody wants to talk about. But it's to this day, if you look at Rahm Emanuel's donors, if you look at Lori Lightfoot's donors, they're all from the financial class, the lawyer class, and the real estate class. That is the reality of Chicago's civics. So if you're not aware of that, and if you're not sort of understanding, and I don't know where that would live inside the Harris School, like some kind of class on civic bullshit and public corruption, and certainly Joe is going to know a lot about this since he wrote about TIFs. He's written about all these things. He's an awesome resource, and I hope that he is very much treasured down there, because he would be an unusual voice. He's an unusual voice for the Harris School. So I'm very happy to know that he's teaching. Okay, so we would do all these meetings about TIFs, right? And the neighbors would say, well, wait a minute, you're saying that this money is flowing by the hundreds of millions of dollars, but they just closed my elementary school. And they did so by saying, and when I say they, the mayor, this would be Mayor Emanuel, or my alderman, said because the city has no money. But you're saying your TIF investigation is showing a counter argument, which is right. Who's right? Are you right, or is the mayor right? So that led to the publishing of the book, Chicago is Not Broke, Funding the City We Deserve. You can get it from our website, wearenotbroke.org. I'm hoping that somebody will use it as a textbook. I mean, we've sold 5,000 copies, but we can't get it reviewed. You see, there's a bit of a dilemma here, you know. But the people who wrote the subjects for the books are all very well-known Chicago experts. I wrote the section on TIFs, and it's basically 3 sections. Money that's been stolen from you. So that's money that you shouldn't have to spend. You know, money that's wasted, right? So there you got the the Chicago arm taking the money out of the purse. And that's corruption, toxic bank deals, and police violence. So these are practices that the city has engaged in and continue to engage in, which essentially steal money, rob money that we shouldn't be spending. And there's nothing revolutionary about those 3 subjects. They've been written about ad nauseum. But the unusual thing about the book is we've asked our authors to put a number on it. Okay, so if you've written about police, if you've written about the cost of corruption, how much is the cost of corruption? And according to Professor Dick Simpson, the answer is $500 million a year. So as long as those practices continue to be unchecked, what the professor is saying is we're wasting about $500 million every year, conservatively. And so on for each of the other chapters. The authors do similar work. All right, so money stolen from us, that's one huge bucket. Then I wrote about money that's being hidden from us. So that's the TIFs. So we know that the TIF thing is an operation, and we know that they're scamming money. We just don't know what happened to it. So again, it's we use the shell game image. You see, we know the money's there, we just can't find it. And again, we talk about TIFs, and we say, you know, getting rid of TIFs would put at least about $800 million back into the budget immediately, as well as the money that's sitting in the TIF account. So right now, from 2020, there was $1.9 billion sitting in the TIF accounts, and the TIFs captured about $825 million in 2020. So what we're saying is, if you were to blow up the TIF program, like somehow wave a magic wand and make it go away, you'd flush that 1.9 billion back into the system, and it would be distributed to the units of government according to the property tax bill. So the Board of Ed would get about 60% of that, right? A one-time infusion. The city of Chicago about 10%, and so on. But then going forward, we would not be capturing that 820 mil. So that would be sort of money that would be available, if you follow me. Yep. So those would be the benefits of the second bucket. The third bucket is a little more creative. This is called money that we are not taking. So there's the image of us throwing the money away, if you will. And what are these ideas? Well, the first idea is a progressive income tax for the state of Illinois. Now, sadly, we had a shot at that last year.
Yeah, we saw how that went.
Huh?
We saw how that went last year.
Right. Well, what did Harris School have a position on it?
I mean, I don't think the Harris School takes official positions on most.
Well, more's the pity.
things.
More's the pity. You guys are studying all this shit, and here was this opportunity, which not just the Harris School as a prominent nonprofit, but the entire nonprofit sector of Illinois collapsed, and it's got blood on its hands again. It was a major opportunity to fix structural racism in the state of Illinois by fixing the income tax, which is horrible. And if the Harris School doesn't have a position on it, shame on them. Because Illinois is a terrible state. It's one of the worst in regressivity. Now, why is that of concern to the Harris School? Well, if you're chasing the shimmer of equity and you don't have a position on the regressive nature of Illinois' income tax, then you're lying to yourselves. You're useless to us. So sadly, Chicago because of good organizing of nonprofits like the Jewish Council of American Affairs, no thanks to the Harris School or any academic institution. I don't want to just dump on the Harris School, but DePaul was absent. The Jane Addams School of Social Work was absent from this fight. But the citizens of Chicago voted overwhelmingly for the constitutional amendment that would have made, but the rest of the state said no. And again, you got to look at Ken Harris. Now, why do I want to beat up? Huh? Ken Griffith. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes. Why do I want to beat up Ken Griffith? Because he spent $50 million of his own money spreading lies about the tax amendment.
And then he left.
Many lies. So again, I mean, I think if it was me, if I was the president of the Harris School of Public Policy, I would have canceled all classes and made it the mission of the Harris School to deploy the students and the faculty statewide to counter the lies of Ken Griffith and his conservative allies that told the lie that you were going to tax people's retirement savings. It was just racist and abominable. But anyway, that opportunity has passed. It's gone. However, since Pritzker just got reelected, I would urge you to look into this as a policy matter. Would it come again for maybe the 2026 or the 2024 ballot? Is Pritzker going to go again and if he does, this is a great opportunity for you guys to think about how can we explain this policy in common language? How can we be part of a good, righteous fight to get this? You guys will probably be graduated by then, but maybe your successors could take this on. Anyway, progressive income tax, sadly, we lost. Then the next issue is a public bank for the city of Chicago. Now, do you guys know what a public bank is?
Yeah, I'm kind of familiar, but definitely could be usable explanation. And one thing I just wanted to note is I feel like a lot of these here, the progressive income tax, public bank, and I was reading whatever your next, there's like another one. One of the mayoral candidates from last election, Jamal Green. I remember one of them had a lot of these as kind of their main tenants.
Well, he's got my book. That's why. Yeah. But a public bank is again a fantastic idea for you guys to explore. And again, if you ever invite me down to the Harris School, I would lecture on this. I would give you a presentation on the book and ask the attendees who knows what about a public bank. And I think that's a great conversation because again, it gets to the heart of the financialization of Chicago. America makes money on money, which again is regressive and racist. So if all we're doing is putting fees on people, like think about how we raise money in the city of Chicago with the boot, with transfer taxes, with regressive fees. There was a soda pop tax. There's a plastic bag tax. All these things are regressive and hurt the little people. So every solution in my book is progressive and sustainable. It doesn't hurt the little guy. The last solution in the book is probably the most controversial, but it also raises the most money, and that is a financial transaction tax. And again, where is the position of Harris School, and what is the people over at the School of Economics and the business school will hate this. They'll fight it with their last breath because they'll say, you can't taxing business? That's terrible. Don't do that. The mercantile exchange will move out of Chicago. That's what they'll say, right? Nonsense. They won't move. But again, to have the economic and moral argument about putting a financial transaction tax of even 10 cents, you know what I'm saying? Let alone $1 per share per trade. So what the book posits is there's over $1 quintillion of value that runs through the market down there on LaSalle Street every year. 1 quintillion. That's a 1 with 18 zeros after it, guys. But there's no tax on it. So if you put a modest tax on each transaction, it would generate about $20 billion. And if you split that up amongst the state, the county, and the city, what the book suggests is it's possible the city might get between $2 and $3 billion every year, just from that one source. But there has been no discussion of substance on the merits. Now, anytime someone writes about it, they'll go to the head of the Merc, and he'll say, "We'll move," and that ends the conversation. It doesn't go any further than that. And I would say to have a class based on my book and to take these solutions one at a time and thoroughly vet them and ask yourselves, well, what would it take to get a public bank in Chicago? What do you know about the public bank in America? There's only one, really, and it's in North Dakota, but it's been around for over 100 years, and it's a conservative prairie Republican state. So how do they have a public bank and nobody else does? And what has been the benefits to the public bank? I mean, you guys get in a car and drive to North Dakota and video, I'll tell you who to talk to. You'll make news. You'll make news not only in your school, but you'll make news in the real world. I mean, you guys could publish a paper that could be an action plan on public banking that could be used by other students of economics and policy that would be enormously useful. I'm on the National Advisory Board of the Institute for Public Banking, and you've got very famous and smart people, but they're clueless about organizing. They have no idea at the national level about how to take this into the communities. But I've done it hundreds of times. And when I explain what a public bank is to people, they love the idea. They've never heard of it before. They're used to banks as being creatures of rape and profit, that you shake the person by the feet until all their money comes out. That's how people think of banks. But the idea that a bank could be actually a public good and actually be a source of cheap credit and actually help my life and don't rape me and send all my money to fucking Wall Street, which already has more money than they know what to do with, that is completely alien to them. And you can see how it's not, nobody at the University of Chicago would want to promote that. I mean, look at your board, look at who's on the board of the Harris School. Look who's on the board of the school itself. It would take money right out of their pockets and their businesses if Chicago would have a public bank. Now, it wouldn't bankrupt the Chase. It's not going to, Citibank isn't going to go away. You know what I mean? But it would be a dangerous precedent to have Chicago institute a public bank. And you could bet your bottom dollar that the PAC or the lobbyists for the banking and financial industry would descend on us and use every tool in their power to make it not happen. Which again I go back to my question of who plans what for who and who makes money from those plans. So that's the book, Chicago is Not Broke. Every idea in it is not revolutionary. It's in place somewhere in America, but we've had no substantive conversation about it in any form other than the ones that we're invited to speak to. So in other words, the Metropolitan Planning Council or the Chicago Community Trust or the Harris School, nobody has had a forum of substance where we would be invited, and then maybe the other side, I don't know, bankers or the Department of Planning or whoever might be on the other side of the head of the police union. I don't know who would be on the other side of these arguments to come and say, Tom, you're full of shit. These ideas have no merit. Nobody wants to get into that fight with us. But I invite you to get the book. You just go to that website and, it's all of $15.
Yeah. Well, Tom, so this is kind of an aside from the project, but I am involved in a group that, it's not an official part of Harris. It's like a student organization. So I'll talk with some people about maybe putting something together where we could have like a panel or a debate or something, because it's definitely something that needs to be done.
I think it would be awesome. And I would come in person and we could have lunch down there and invite, and there are other allies from the University of Illinois that you would invite from, because that's a pretty radical, there are some radical professors that I know, and you could have yourself a nice event that would be, I think, useful and actually would maybe help me sell some books, which is not
that's not a bad thing at all. So now that okay, so you gave us the rundown of kind of Chicago's not broke. Here's why. We've got money we're not taking. We've got money that's been stolen, money that's being hidden. And I just want to kind of connect this back to Joe's class and kind of like, our point in all of this, which for us, like our focus as kind of dictated by the class is the charter is the processes and governance in Chicago. So I guess my question to you, Tom, is so, obviously just institutional reforms and governance changes aren't going to fix Chicago. They're not going to fix not going to fix the finances. Do you think, or I guess how, I think is a better question. How do you think governance changes and process changes, and which ones in particular do you think would be effective in bringing about these changes that you're talking about, like instituting a public bank, a LaSalle Street tax? Like what changes? How could you empower the city and the people through
It's governance? A great, super question, super tactical, strategic question. Yeah. So the charter is a long moonshot. And so that could be a 10-year plan, so maybe you're saying we could go for some easy fixes to get a better city short term, but our idea over the long term is really to put the city on the examining table and ask ourselves, what is a city for? Who is a city for? Like with no preconceptions. I think that's the spirit behind your exercise, right? I mean, if you're going to take the charter apart and put it back together again, I think you're really asking yourself those fundamental questions first. Yeah. So, for example, in some places in Seattle and Milwaukee, they've merged the city and the county, right? So now you're saying so again, it's part of that yeasty process that you would go through first. So does it make sense to have a city government anymore, knowing that it's a region? We're in a region. So it's Cook County or the Metro Chicago is really what we're talking about. And these other arguments of like, well, I live in the suburbs, but I come into the Chicago, so there's a head tax, but no, we don't want a head tax. But I really live, in Evanston or wherever, but I really need the city for my livelihood. Because I need the finance district, I need the metro, I need the L's, I need the density of the city. So I'm really sucking off the city I'm evading my responsibility, by these rings. And every city has the rings, right? So people want to leave where the Black people are. We want to be where the poor people are. We don't want to be, at the core of the city, but we want to take advantage of what cities are. So the question for the planners is, well, let's just merge the whole thing. So you can't get away. You know what I mean? You'd have to move to fucking Oshkosh if that's what you want to do. But if you're gonna sort of be part of the city body and take advantage of it, you got to pay. Okay, you got to pay. So we're gonna merge Cook County and the city of Chicago, and call it Metro Chicago or whatever. And now that's the perspective. So we're gonna merge the 32 police departments. We don't need the Cook County Sheriff, the city police, the Forest Preserve Police, Glencoe Police. We're going to rationalize all that, and we'll save a boatload of money, won't we? We'll have one hospital system, you know what I mean? One Department of Roads. We don't need 32 Department of Roads. Again, all those, remember, Illinois has more units of government than any place in America. So I think the northern part of the state has like 1,500 crazy, because there's a metropolitan water district, a mosquito district, all that should go away. So that would be one way to look at it. But the short-term answer would be cut the city council in half, perhaps, create a city bureau like comparable to the Congressional Budget Office. That would give.
And then, Tom, when you say that, do you say that is in something similar to COFA, but just like a more funded COFA, where it's kind of a body of the city? Okay, so part of the city council for them to use.
Right, and so different from the inspector general, who I believe now has the ability to subpoena the city council. So make sure, if that's not the case, make sure that the inspector general's office does cover the city council, because it was carved out before. That was one of the reasons why Joe got in trouble. He wanted to cover. He wanted the IG's office to cover city council. I'm not sure if that happened. So that's something that I'm not up on. But so you have the inspector general's office able to investigate city council. You took the workers' comp away from the finance committee under corrupt Ed Burke. So that was a huge corruption scandal. So that's not there anymore. But give the city council, maybe with only 25 members, give them a robust budget office with staff so they can create their own agenda, if you will, and not just react knee-jerkily. I mean, remember, with this strong mayoral thing, Mayor Daley sent the privatization of the parking meters to city council, and they had 3 days to respond. It was a bill like this thick. Nobody had the ability, nobody had the willpower to push back on it, but those few that wanted to push back had no instrumentation. And again, the Harris School wasn't available to the aldermen to say, we'll take a look at it for you. So the aldermen were on their own, and of course, the parking meters was passed 45-5. So again, we don't really need a city council. I mean, if that's all they're going to do is rubber stamp every bullshit idea that the mayor gives them, then do away with them 100%. But absent that, cut the numbers in half, give them a strong body to respond. So the next time the mayor drops a privatization deal on them, like Mayor Emanuel was thinking of privatizing Midway, right? He was going to sell Midway. It would have been the same thing. He would have dropped the giant bill on the city council, and he would have gotten had he wanted to, he would have pushed it through. It was only the federal government that stopped him because there's so much federal money tied up in airports. But the idea of privatizing an airport or even selling Chicago's water supply, all these things are on the table. And what I'm saying is the city council has not the wit or the wisdom to push back. And so therefore there's no defense. I mean, that's what I say in one of my 4 key questions: who's watching our backs? Because the next bullshit project that comes along, they're going to get a pass on. Okay, then back to the budgeting. So things like that the alderman should only have 1 job. So no alderman should be a lawyer or be consultant. I mean, very simple things like that would be quite useful. There's enormous conflicts of interest. Things having like public meetings not in the middle of the day. So again, kind of boring, but it gets in the way of transparency and people like me trying to get involved in government. If you're saying, Tom, you can come to a TIF meeting, it's 1 o'clock at City Hall. That's basically saying fuck you to the citizens. So having meetings at 6 o'clock in the communities, even having city council meetings at 6 o'clock and moving them around the city would help a little bit to open the fresh air. Having the budget process much more open and transparent would also be helpful. Again, it's not going to save the world, but for those people that do want to get involved, Mayor Lightfoot, to her credit, had more meetings than Rahm did in his entire tenure. Rahm had no budget meetings. He didn't want to go to the community at all, so he was the worst. But then campaign finance, things having to do with campaigning, like how do you become a leader? Again, I think are relevant to your question, because Chicago being the most corrupt city in America, it's very difficult to get on the ballot here. So let's simplify access to the ballot in terms of being a candidate. So right now, if I'm running for mayor, it's 25,000 signatures. That's a lot. That's crazy. It's very difficult to run for office in the city of Chicago. We have the primary in March. Again, it's done on purpose. So let's simplify that. And Professor Dick Simpson at the University of Illinois is quite the expert. If you just give him a call, or his colleagues, he's gotten a couple of different books on it that he's written over the years.
So Dick talked to the city council group, and so we have his interview that it's on my list of things to watch. But our group has talked to him. Yeah,
so he's kind of the go-to guy for that part of the fix, which would make everything else more easy to do. So you would be able to have other good laws, you'd have other good government practices if it was easier to become an alderman in the first place. So now we have a more democratic socialist running, so that's good. And maybe after next year's election, we might even have 15 to 16 democratic socialists or independents, but it's still not the majority. So again, simplifying access to the ballot, making it harder to challenge, because the Democratic Party hires a guy named Mike Casper, who's the evil genius behind the Democratic Party. He's the guy who will fight you as an independent candidate. He will come into the ballot process and challenge all your petitions, but he works for the Democratic Party. So he used to work for Mike Madigan. Mike Madigan may go to prison, I hope, but the machine remains pretty much in place. And Mike Casper, who was the treasurer for a while of the Democratic Party, I don't know what his official position now is, but he's the attack dog. that's used to take candidates off the ballot. So if you, Jack, decide to run for alderman and you're an outsider, a Democratic Socialist or whatever, you're a reformer, you're going to cause trouble, you might face him in the ballot counting process. In other words, before you even get on the ballot, you may be sitting in a room with him going over each of your signatures, right, on your petitions. And this guy, Casper, knows the election judge. He might have put the election judge there. And so they're chatting about their children, and you're going, oh, I'm fucked.
Yeah.
My opponent knows the judge, and that has happened over and over again. Okay. So you want to clean all that up. So that's, I guess what I'm saying is go to Dick Simpson and follow his playbook, which he has many, many ideas. And why is that relevant? Because in order to clean all this up, we got to get good people into the system. Okay. Now, once you're elected, no other jobs. You're not a lawyer, you're not a lobbyist. One job, be an alderman. If the money isn't good enough, then don't take the job. Okay. It pays about $140,000. That should be enough. Okay. So you can't be a lawyer, you can't be a lobbyist. Your wife can't be a lobbyist either. Tighten all that stuff up. There's rampant conflict of interest, which again, this is part of what Dick has written about over the years. Okay. So that's how I would start. Those close to home fixes on the way to these big picture items about revising the charter or and I guess along the way, the question that I'm asking you to think about is, what is a city for? Who is it for? If you don't answer those questions, you're just going to be technocrats moving chess pieces around on the chessboard,
Yep.
And I think Ed Ed in his book, I think he is asking those, I think, very basic questions, right? And that's what we at the Civic Lab, we have asked those questions. Who is the city for? What is it for? And right now, our analysis is it's an instrument to move money from the many to the few. That's what the city is for right now. That's what the city is doing right now with the help of the University of Chicago, okay, and its allies. So right now, the city is acting, not just Chicago, but other cities across America and the country. The city has become an instrument that's moving money and assets from the many into the pockets of the few. That's it.
Yep.
So anything that you're doing, I hope, will be guided by that spirit of justice and equity. So planning, when we say who plans what for who and who makes money from those plans, this should be part of your thinking, because up until today, it's as I said, the commercial club of the City Club of Chicago and Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill. Those are the two entities that are planning the city right now, and have been doing so for 75 to 100 years, because the commercial club played for this, right? The commercial club paid for this, and they're still powerful. And Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, I'd say for the last 75 years, have been behind everything. They're the guys who gin up the Olympic plan. They're the guys who were hired to design the Lincoln Yards or Project 78. I mean, it's those guys who are behind, if you follow me.
Do they have?
I would just say one final thing about this entire process you're going through. To ask yourself and to be mindful of who plans what for who, and who makes money from those plans. So don't be fooled by even Joe Ferguson telling you that you got to be mindful of, is Joe in anybody's pocket? And I'm just saying, if he is, then it should be disclosed that he's a consultant to whatever. I mean, all relationships should be on the table. As students of policy, you guys got to know that you're not being used as tools either. So everybody's cards are on the table, and then with full transparency, Joe is in the employ of the Metropolitan Planning Council, or Joe is a consultant on the side to Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, or whatever. He should be transparent with you, and if he has no such relationships, excellent. But if he does, be aware.
Yeah. All right. Tom, it is 10:30. Wanted to be respectful of your time. If we had a couple more questions, do you have a couple more minutes, or are you pretty hard stop at 10:30?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Hey, Evan and GA, I know I've asked a couple questions now. Do you guys have anything you wanted to touch on with Tom?
Wanted to dig into the question of how to make the budget process more transparent. Obviously, that can be done. The easiest way is more community meetings, getting into a broader cross section of Chicago's different communities who have different needs. But what we've found is that that may not be the best answer, even if you're saying you're engaging with the community more, listening to more voices. What downstream impacts does that actually have on what is built into the budget or whom the budget is working for? So I'm wondering what else you would advocate for, or what else groups are currently organizing around, or what they want to push the city to do to have a more comprehensive community of voices involved in building the budget and contributing to what it's spending on.
Well, I got to say,
I was just gonna say, Tom, real quick, just because I think something we've talked about in class a lot, and Joe's brought up, is using community input kind of just as a check the box type thing,
yes,
rather than.
yes. I think that is an excellent question, Evan, and I would really center that question in you all's work to like, make that, embroider that and put it over the fireplace. Because if you really, really ask that question over and over again, I think you're on the right tip right there. Because I think what Jack just said is kind of the way of it. I mean, we are big on these dog and pony show meetings just to check a box. That is really, even under Mayor Lightfoot, pretty much, I'd have to say, you know, the law demands that we have a certain number of meetings, whatever. And once we've checked that box, we can just do what we want to do all along anyway. So how do we not do that? I think that is a great question. So participatory budgeting. So some aldermen have participatory budgets, but it's only for their $1 million in menu money, which can only be used in certain things. So what if we put the entire city budget as a participatory budget? What would that even look like? So where in the world, in some places in Brazil, I would tell you, do you put multi-billion-dollar budgets on the table for the people to look at? So that would be a question for your class to look into under the topic of participatory budgeting. And not just this $1 million menu money, which is chump change, but I mean, what would it take if you put the entire city budget on the table? How would that even work? How many meetings would you have to have? How would you even incent the neighbors to participate, you know, to take time? They're not being paid, right? You're not being paid, but you're kind of students in a way. So you're not being paid, but it's kind of, you know, you're paying for the education. So you might go to a participatory budget meeting as part of your education. The alderman would go because he or she's being paid to go, but why should Mrs. Jackson go to 10 meetings? So again, to look at that concept in a new way, participatory budgeting for an entire city where you want to get 100,000 people involved, what would it take? How far back do you have to start? Would you have to start like in high school, you know, to do a budgeting class in a high school and pay kids out of some pot to be teenage budget monitors in order to have a cadre of 10,000 smart citizens who could be paid part-time, you know, to take a few weekends off to lead some kind of neighborhood process? That's what it would take. And I think it's a very excellent thought experiment to ask yourselves. So it's, in other words, so it's not just window dressing, because I think that's what Jack was alluding to. It's not just window dressing that we have to go through because we have to check a box, because that's kind of what it is. But if you really want to get participatory budgeting, oh my God, you gotta raise the floor. You got to do so many things behind the scenes or before the scenes to get us ready. Now you're kind of repurposing government. You're repurposing education. You might have to repurpose Chicago's community colleges. You might have to actually repurpose one of the community colleges to do nothing but participatory budgeting. And that's what I get my 2-year degree on. You're thinking you're back engineering to get to where you want to go, and you're thinking, well, the city colleges is like a $400 or $500 million operation. What if we took Daly College and made it nothing but a participatory budgeting place? and you get a 2-year degree, and the city employs you. So, so you would get a job as being a participatory budget organizer or something, and then, and then the city colleges would teach a class in it, and the Board of Education would create a class for the elementary schools and the high schools. You know what I'm saying? You're back engineering to get to the place that would say, how do I get 10,000 citizens in the city engaged every year meaningfully in this participatory budgeting process that would actually impact Chicago's $20 billion operating budget? Well, we need 10,000 people, we got 50 wards, we need 100 people in every ward. And we'll give ourselves 10 years to get there. To me, that's a project worthy of the Harris School. That's a project worthy of a class that would do nothing but design that and teach and build materials and then one of you guys should run for fucking alderman, by the way, Evan. I don't know if you're going to stay in Chicago, but I mean, this is why we have a Harris School, in my opinion. This is where you would really show some real value to the city that hosts you and makes you possible. That if Evan says, you know what, I'm going to stay in Chicago, I'm going to run for alderman from the 4th Ward, and I'm going to use my time in the Harris School, I'm going to build my base, I'm going to find my team, I'm going to build my policy from the Harris School, and I'm going to get a degree for it, by the way. And then I'm going to announce my candidacy. I'm going to graduate next year, and I'm going to run for alderman in 2025. But I'm going to use my time at the Harris School to build my team and to say why this is a thing of justice and equity and innovation. And by the way, I'm going to write a book about it. So Evan, you're going to become an author, and you're going to show us the way for other schools of policy across the country that just don't suck off the tit of the city. Mr. Harris has made his billions as a banker, put his fucking name on the school. Good for you, Harris. You made your bones. Good for you. But how about it if you created a program unique at the Harris School to show people who are concerned with justice and inequity that here's a template. We're going to use our time together as students to craft these policies, and then we're going to run for fucking office. How about that? Now, if Harris School did that, I think you'd have kids flock from all over the world to learn that set of skill. You know what I'm saying? And to take your knowledge that you're learning today in this session together and your other classes that you're working on, and go right into the world of policy and politics and say, I'm going to now become an alderman. And I'm going to represent Hyde Park. Anyway, I get carried away.
It's important, and this is just my opinion. I think the Harris School, in terms of their urban policy offerings, is being kind of under-resourced just in terms of classes and things for people in urban policy, especially in Chicago. I think it's like the various centers can,
Well, you can raise a little hell. Demand a class. Tell them they should hire Tresser. Come down to the Harris School and teach this class called Reimagining Chicago. And that the students in the class will all pledge to run for office. That they're there not just to learn policy in the abstract, but they're going to go govern. You're going to go from this class to wherever you land, whether you stay in Chicago or go back to wherever you came from, and you pledge to run for office, taking these lessons and these principles that guide you that are based on equity and justice and no bullshit. Harris, Mr. Irving Harris, billionaire, put your name on the school. We're going to take what we've learned and we're going to turn it into justice. We're going to take what we've learned and translate our values and our interests that have driven us to be in the school in the first place, and to profess an interest in the common good. We're going to go run for office. How about that?
Well, someone who did that model, speaking of billionaires with income skills, was someone at the New Chicago Foundry School, the social service school, Amaya Pilar, who we've also talked to in this class. We went to Chicago and kind of parlay that into
Yes, awesome. I highly recommend him as a role model. You know, I think you could sort of gather at his feet, you know. You know, he's got himself endowment. He's working in some very well off project, and I think he's working on a book on public banking. So yes, he's an excellent role model to follow, and I would definitely get him down there and have him be a resource for you, or start a club, or find some way to, you know, suck off his knowledge and make him more of an institutional resource, as opposed to the casual lecturer or someone that you might know to be available to you. But yeah, he's a great example of what I'm speaking about. And he's someone who went into the elective office and now is in your world of policy and publishing, you know. By all means, great example.
Well, thank you enough for being so generous to this content for us. I know we came in with a very narrow scope, but I think it was really helpful for you to give us a big picture here, like really kind of
All right. You got any other questions? You
we don't have perspective with yours. Obviously, I'm in Chicago all the time. You know, so it is great. I'll reach out to you at some point about, you know, if I'm sure they come involved in special panels or a debate or something. I'd want to really.
Okay. All right. Well, I say we've been recording this. I'll make the recording available to you so you can repurpose it. But again, the Civic Lab is an instrument available to you and your colleagues, as I've mentioned. And thank you for your very patient ear.
Yeah, if you could share that video with us, that would be
All right. Will do. Take it slow, you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.